Welcome everybody to The Medium and the Message. This is a panel where we'll be speaking on revolution in music and in hip hop specifically, the art form itself and everything around it, and the changes it's a part of to create not only a better industry, but also the world we live in. And we really couldn't have picked a better group of people for this topic. We're truly in for a treat. Starting off, we have the voice of Public Enemy, which is one of the greatest and most influential groups of all time, but not only a leader for PE, also one of the main leading voices in hip hop today. We have Mr. Chuck D. How are you, Chuck?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me here.
Also, we have co-founder of another incredibly influential group, Stetsasonic, or should I say band. You know, they were one of the first groups to really perform with the live band. And this man went on to produce many records from everyone from Mary J. Blige to Red Hot Chili Peppers. You know, they don't call him the professor for nothing. We got Daddy-O. How are you, sir?
Salute. I'm good. Surviving below degree weather, but I'm good.
And then also we have another legend and the member of the famous Bay Area group, The Click, the leading lady of Sick With It Records, and really one of the first leading ladies in hip hop. She's now an entrepreneur, an activist, an author. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch. We have Sugar T.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today, Sugar?
I'm great. I'm always excited about making change and sowing good seeds to the people.
Appreciate having you. And of course, it's important to hear from the legends that paved the way, but it's also just as important to hear from ones that are carrying the torch. And, you know, this man has certainly been doing that, not only one of the most versatile and talented artists in hip hop, but also runs his own nonprofit called Your Boy Life. We have Alan Kingdom.
Great to meet you guys. My name is Alan. Definitely an honor being on this call with you guys today. So I'm thankful for that.
Appreciate you too, man. And me, myself, I'm Shane Gill. I'll be your moderator. I started in the music industry at Duck Down Records, and now for the last 7 years, I've been running Opposition, which is a music company, distributor, label, and much more aimed to empower artists and lead in modern marketing. So yeah, just again, thank you all for being here. You know, thank you for all the work you've been doing for the majority of your lives now, you know, not only in music, but also being leaders in, you know, your local community and also in the hip hop community. And that's actually how I kind of wanted to, you know, start off, you know, because wanted to kind of get each of yours advice on sort of balancing that all out, because you know, you're all so active in your communities, and that's really like a second job in itself. So what advice can you give if someone is trying to succeed in their career, but also wants to give back and make real changes in their community?
So my advice to a newer artist is to do research, because again, you can't just tell them to be a leader a lot of times, you know, unless you've had a relationship with them. And most younger artists don't necessarily want to come into a relationship with us generals because they think they got it all together and they're watching the hype of the brand, unless they see like a Chuck D that's everywhere, making himself visible and making sure people know that he's there to do, you know, to be that leader available to them, or like a Daddy-O or like a Sugar T. You know, then at that point you can identify those, but they're very difficult to identify because most of them are all following the flock and using the same formula of just hoping that they could get famous or rich or get seen or whatever their reasoning is. And they don't necessarily have that rough time yet. So a lot of times when you have that experience, you have to do this authentically. It's not just something that you just do because you've seen somebody else do. So artists, I, you know, encourage you to, you know, do your homework. It's hard to say a direct answer because like I said, everyone is in their own, you know, level of where they are, and everyone is different and everybody is different ages when they're coming in being new. So just be authentic and just remember that, you know, in order for you to come up with some leadership ability, look around your neighborhoods, listen to the content, and listen clearly of what you think will happen if there is young people following you, or people that are ignorant and not as exposed to other type of lifestyles following your content, and what the results of them modeling behind this behavior could be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you see what I'm saying? And that's what I could give as advice to those who are new, and use your common sense and open up your mind and think later, is this something that you would want your kid, to follow, to take off their clothes and strip, in front of the camera, thinking that's their only way out? Or would you want them to get some education and some experience and be a wife and, enjoy all the great things that us as queens really are here to enjoy, along with music, but just maybe a different way, or figure out the right style. So get educated on what's out there and use your common sense and be well-rounded. Go get other skills. Get other skills so that way you're not as quick to just sell out to anything, and get knowledge, because your knowledge is your power. So I was blessed to be a machine, so that made me say, you know what, it's okay if don't nobody else want to rock with me, because I'm tired of this brand, because I see where this brand could lead me and others, at the end of the day, looking far beyond when you already got that together and not wanting to be stagnated. It's a sacrifice to have to stop and, redirect. So you got to be prepared to do that. You know what I mean? And I did that, and it comes with the package, you being underestimated. It comes with you being thrown under the bus. It comes with you, maybe needing to go to school, and go collect some credentials and rework things. And I did that. So be willing to sacrifice. It's okay, because eventually it'll get there. And connect with people who are leaders, in your space, real leaders. I mean, like positive leaders that actually you can know the difference by, if you go by what they say and you think about what could happen, in the end, then they're a good leader. If they're, it's giving you another way of life, and the any result of that particular type of lifestyle that might be pushed, or that information, then they're not the best leaders. So, not trying to be long-winded, but it's not a quick question, because we're looking at a whole group of people that are out there, and hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's very helpful. I think to adjust the question a bit, to kind of pinpoint on something you said about, like, maybe there's a certain thing that kind of inspires it. It doesn't just happen naturally. So maybe to the other panelists, was there kind of a key moment or an event in your life that made you realize, you wanted to use your voice and music to make a change?
Well, I'd like to speak to that quick. Everything that Sugar T was telling us is something that I nodded my head to. She made it very easy for us. And that's one thing that makes this thing happen. And when you see that pressure could get diversified amongst a peer group or artist group where everybody has their voice. I was happy when I first started out to see a great benchmark and role modelship in Daddy O and Stetsasonic. Before I got involved to actually be a voice on records and recording, I wouldn't say that was a major goal of mine per se, but as an organization of those that were involved in hip hop, myself, Hank Shockley, our unit called Spectrum City, we also promoted gigs, and our best promotions happened to be in the beginnings of Stetsasonic's career. And they were the best group that we ever had to promote. They were an organization. They were a tight unit. They were good brothers. And coincidentally, when we became recording artists, it happened to fall into that. The first group that we toured with together was Stetsasonic, sharing a bus on the Def Jam tour. LL Cool J, Houdini, Dougie Fresh, in a big RIP to Ecstasy, who we just lost, and Eric B. and Rakim, and Public Enemy and Stetsasonic shared the bus for a whole entire, damn near like 2/3 of a whole year. 13 of us on a 10-passenger bus, and seeing a role model directly and talking to them and living with them after also seeing them on the other side from promoting, that was a good benchmark for me. And that they were similar in our fabric of how we were as young Black men coming from the New York area, them from Brooklyn, us from Long Island. And I thought for me, Daddy-O, most especially being the leader of Stetson Sonic, and also Delight. They were the two old heads that I saw a good sense of character. And when I saw that character, it rubbed off for me on the type of artist and the type of artist I wanted to be. Star was taken out of the equation. The type of artist that I wanted to be, the camaraderie with fans and narrowing that gap between fans and artists. You know, Daddy-O would get off the bus, and then later on myself and Daddy-O would get off the bus and go to a different part of the United States and scout the rap scene in that city. I mean, who does that, right? Who does that even now? And we would be enamored about what was going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And not to say everybody's into everything when you're on tour. I mean, everything is everything. It's all good. But that extra dedication to the craft, I dug, and it rubbed off on me. So to me, that was leadership in my career, and something that says it's going to be a turning point of what I can do and what, you know who you're not, as opposed to you know who you are. You come in kind of knowing who you are, but when you go through the career thing, you kind of know who you're not. And that was cool.
And then, yeah, speaking on that, Daddy-O, I mean, real hip hop heads really, if they know Stetson Sonic and they know you, they've kind of seen how you really.
You lost me for a second.
Oh, no, good. We got you back. But yeah, speaking on what Chuck said, like, you know, real hip hop heads know that, you know, you've kind of been one of those older brothers to the hip hop community right from the start in the late 80s. But it'd be really interesting to hear from you if you also had, like, who are your role models, or what was kind of that time before you kind of grew into that kind of more, you know, older brother kind of role. Who was kind of helping you at that time back then?
Well, a couple of things happened. One was my brother Asim used to always say this. I remember one time my brother Asim said to me, D, do you realize that we was grown men when we first went on tour? So Stetson Sonic is kind of two sides. It's the old cats and the young cats. So Prince Paul, I literally had to go to his mama, shout out Miss Houston, RIP, and get permission on paper for Paul to come out, not only to record, but to come out on tour, because he was a minor. Wise was right after a minor. Bobby was right after a minor. Fuquan kind of falls in the middle, and then Me, Delight, and DBC is on the other side. So I was a grown man by the time I started making records. So conceptually, I never really looked at it probably the way somebody who's a kid that starts rapping looks at it. I was already a grown man. My biggest influence was you know, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. My favorite group was the Fantastic Five, but Flash and them went on to make records. That's one of the differences between Flash and Cold Crush and a few other people. Treacherous did it too, but it turned out in a different way. But Flash and them went on to make records. And I guess I would say there was a lot of pieces out there, but the message kind of was a little turnaround for me. Which to me, pound for pound, in my opinion, is probably the greatest rap record ever made. That's just me. That's a Daddy-O-ism. But when the message played, I heard this soundtracking, right? That's what I call it. So like the soundtrack of the street. You know, Chuck was to come along later on and say that rap music was black music, CNN, but that was later on. Very early, the message was it was soundtracking the street. Which, you know, it's interesting because I told Sugar T not too long ago that, you know, when they mentioned my top 5 albums, you know, Game Related is my #2 hip hop album of all time. Like, I know the Game Related album forwards and backwards, like, and that is because I felt like in the 90s, I'll move around, but I'll try to make it quick. In the 90s, I stopped listening to a lot of New York hip hop. And the reason I did is because I'm from the street and cats was lying about their life. So they were saying they were selling drugs and I knew them. I knew if they got robbed, I knew all of that. So I was like, that don't work for me. But then I started listening to the Bay and I started listening to Houston And I felt it. I would later on to go on to work with 40 and a few and be legit in them, but that's later I worked with them. But I felt it and I understood like where they was at. And like Chuck said, what Chuck and I would do is we would just get off the bus and just go find out what was going on. I remember having an argument in the bus. I say this all the time about a record called Dope Man by a group called NWA, and everybody from Public Enemy is shouting at Chuck, and everybody but Stetsasonic, except Wise, I always say this, except Wise, is shouting at Daddy-O, and they like, oh, no, me and Chuck is trying to explain to them, listen, man, we're not gonna be the only ones rapping. It's gonna come from other areas. You know what I mean? And then later on, Public Enemy will be the first band to start taking people like Sir Mix-a-Lot and all of that, and these other regions, and Luke and them.
And you guys took them to. You guys were on that tour.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We did that tour together.
Absolutely.
Bring the Noise tour.
Absolutely. So, but what happens is, I knew it was possible when I heard Mel and Duke Booty do The Message. I knew it was possible. I knew soundtracking was possible. And then the other side of my influence, which is very interesting for me always, is after rap, right? So that's after all of us are doing what we're doing. Me and Chuck been joined at the hip for a very, very long time. So, if you listen to It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back and In Full Gear, you hear them records mirror each other. You gotta, you gotta be a musician to hear it. Other than that, you just hearing rap, but those records mirror each other, right? But then later on, I got to pick up what Sugar T and them was doing. I got to pick up what Scarface and them was doing. So I think, the possibility of being influential for me comes from pretty much the whole spectrum of hip hop. We can be influential. We can do some things. We can say some things. And we could, this is gonna sound mad corny, but I'm gonna say it. And we can fight the good fight. I think that's a possibility all the time. I think it's always a possibility to fight the good fight. The thing is, and this is something that you can learn from Chuck and I, is the connection. We have an incredible connection to Ice-T. Incredible connection to Ice-T. So Ice-T, when he's on the road with us, this is a street dude. He doing colors. His intro to his show, they doing the it looked like what it looked like the yard in jail. They shooting dice and they, you know what I'm saying? But the connection, it's like watching that television show when you see Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X walking together. We need everything. Like that's I think one thing that people misunderstand, especially when they start looking at, say, Stetsasonic or Public Enemy, is that everybody's going to be a quote unquote message group. And that's just not how it's done. The way it's done is, like Chuck said, it's done with the weight of this thing being on everybody's shoulders, right? So E40 holding that weight too. Sugar T holding that weight too. Scarface holding that weight too. Mix-a-Lot holding that weight too. When you start understanding it from that perspective. And so the advice that I would give young people is to look around, because you got more to see than we did. Me and Chuck had to search for records. We would go try to find 12 inches, go try to find cassettes. No CDs at this time, right? So we trying to find stuff. You guys got Spotify, Apple Music. I could stop there. I don't have to. You know what I mean? YouTube. So you can find what's going on. I was on a Clubhouse room the other day with Apathy was in the room. I mean, those guys are there. Apathy, Self-Titled, they all there. Like, people are around. Immortal Technique, they there. So the issue is to be able to understand it's a shared responsibility. I think even Public Enemy, who holds a big part of that weight, or in some years, most of that weight, still shared some responsibility with us, with Eric B. and Rakim, believe it or not, with Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Y'all don't know this, but it's true, right? You don't have to hold it all yourself. In order to fight the good fight, you don't have to hold it on yourself. Sometimes you just got to know somebody that's dope enough to do it. You might be a guy like Ice-T that's talking about 6 in the Morning in Colors, but he know Chuck and Daddy-O. You know what I mean? So he supports us in ways that people don't even know. I mean, I'll stop here by saying to you, I don't know if it was Mississippi or Alabama, but man, they was coming to get us. Ice-T and them came out, they bust with them guns. They ain't come to get us no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you gotta understand, like, I needed that too. You know what I mean? I didn't need just, you know, so it's a shared responsibility. And so look around, you might not be J. Cole, you might not be Kendrick Lamar, but you could help him and you could be his brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd say another thing, Shane, I like to build on that too, on those points, is that, you know, these new artists, and I would say Generation Z and the one before, but these new artists especially, they always drop in jewels. I think the biggest lapse is the interpreters in the middle of that. Those that can take those jewels, especially if they drop in, you know, something inside their song, and it's so like that. Like I'm in Atlanta now, you know, so I said, let me listen to, like, on the way to picking up some groceries and getting to the crib, let me listen to maybe like 20 minutes of 107.5 to see, you know, exactly what 107.9, see what I could just hear from another ear perspective. And of course, I'm hearing, you know, the classic, you know, 2021, you know, Money Moo and Money Bag Yo, right? And they got so much slurring in their game and so much mumble in their game with auto-tune that you gotta really be a acute ear. And they not dropping everything in a row. They dropping scattered bars all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I'm picking it, and I had to go back, and especially, I know you recall this, and also you, Sugar T, that I thought that in 1986, the most political record, right, if you want to say political record, came from a song that only had one political bar in it. And that was later. I just recently found out that Kane wrote the lyric, and I thought Biz Markie and Nobody Beats the Biz wrote that line. You know, Reagan is the president, but I voted for Shirley Chisholm. I'm like,
that's hard. Yeah, that's
you know
hard.
what I'm saying? That
That's
was one
hard.
line that said one line that spoke the whole record. If you wanted to come from that angle, that's all it took. So today, when you checking out somebody, you might not hear, and they just dropping one boom, boom, and it might be about COVID to, you know, like, you know, to Kamala Harris, and it's only there and it fades and disappears, but it's at the right place, right time, and leaves. You got to be a hell of an interpreter, and it should be your duty to be a acute curator of this art form, to be able to squeeze the orange juice out of those oranges. Because if you just let it play, you're going to miss the mark. And leadership is like, I know what they're doing. I'm going to squeeze the best out of them. And I'm going to have orange juice or fruit juice for the masses that this person is spitting. He got a lot of, you know, rinds in it and a whole bunch of, you know, seeds and stuff that you won't eat with the fruit, but the juice in it, that's what a curator got to do. So if anything that has failed hip hop and rap music and leadership, it was the area that radio was supposed to cover, and they just didn't. You know, if somebody makes a love song, they're not just talking about, you know, everybody doing the, you know, the double back monster and getting it on. They talk about all these other elements of love, and then that's supposed to be like, okay, now you know what happened, or you can guess what happened after that. But if you just like, you know, just take it and just reduce it to ucking, you know what I'm saying? And then that's what the love song is. You wouldn't have these radio stations even being able to have a foundation or a platform. So they failed hip hop and rap in my point of opinion. They failed it terribly. The curators and the middle people and interpreters of hip hop and rap have failed it for 50 years.
Yeah, that, I mean, just on the back of that, Shane, shout out to you in opposition, man. You know what I mean? Like I really see like a different thing coming. And I know y'all young, but you know, I've been on conference calls with your staff about Self-Destruction 2, which my brother and Chuck is on, which Sugar T is gonna be on some of the records. And you know, you guys are, you know, you're moving forward, and you young. So shout out to you for that, bro.
I appreciate that, man. And yeah, we're definitely gonna talk about that and the One Nation Project a little bit later. But yeah, I definitely want to get Alan your perspective on this, because you know you've come up in a different generation, so you've had, like Daddy-O said, like, you know, more accessible to what, you know, his generation did, and Chuck and Sugar's generation. So were you, in your start of your career, kind of pulling more from those, you know, past influences, the ones who came before you? Was it more your peers? And then also, like, kind of saying what Chuck said, like, have you kind of seen that pressure from the industry to kind of, you know, do songs a certain way or speak on certain things to get more, you know, coverage and radio play?
Yeah, I agree with what the professor was saying. Like, you need both. You know what I mean? So like, even with the new, like, you need that. There's a reason why things that have happened before. You know what I mean? There is a formula. Even though things change and the style may change and the sounds that people use in the production and the words may change, there is a universal formula as to what I feel like people like good music. And I don't even know if I can explain it, but I just know that there is always something that you can learn from, like, the giants that are still here, you know what I mean, or the giants that have existed. But I definitely think that also what he was saying with the new music, like, the jewels are being dropped, but it's more slick. Like, you gotta listen, because before it used to be, I'm here, this is the change I'm making, this is the change I want in the world, and this is what I'm doing. And it was very pronounced. Now it's like, because that's been done before, I feel like the younger generation had to find a new way to do it, because that had already been done. You can't do that again. You know what I mean? Once you make that statement, once you say, you know what I mean, like F the police and all this stuff, and you make that statement and you're the first one to do it, how can you do that again? So it's kind of like mixing it into, okay, what do people want to see? You look at the movies, you look at the video games these days, people need an action movie and they need an action story. So they need it to be a movie. So you gotta incorporate that within your stuff. But then I feel like people still drop their jewels in their music too. It's like, if you are doing this for a long time and you have passion, I just feel like you're doing it for a reason, you know, and it's inevitable. It's gonna come out. You can't really hide that. Like, you can try and you can add the flavors that people like, because you have to. At the end of the day, you're in the music business. Everyone does it to some degree. Even if you're talking about, you know, conscious things, etc., you're still listening to what's going on and putting that in your music. So you can't just be completely removed and say, you know what, I'm gonna make just noise music that no one wants to listen to. Like, to some degree, we're all influenced by what's going on. And I think you just have to stick to what's true to you. Like you said, you need the J. Cole's, but then you also need the YGs, you know, and you also need the ASAP Rockies, and you also need everybody. You know, I think it's a balance. So I've always looked at it like that, and I think we need everything. I think we need everything that's going on right now too. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to hear from you, Sugar, because, you know, as a woman in hip hop in the '90s, you know, undoubtedly had to work 2 times, 3 times as hard as your male counterparts, and now kind of being a leading voice in women empowerment. In what areas, you know, we've talked about today and we've talked about the past, what areas more on that front have you seen things improve? And what areas have things kind of stayed the same and need more attention?
Well, believe it or not, doing music in the 80s, start in the 86, being serious about it, we didn't have to work harder. We were even. We were all on even grounds with our male counterparts. We were all just group members. It wasn't, oh, this is the female in the group, or okay. It changed in the 2000, okay, when we all became more adults and more interested in moving in directions of growth, okay, because hip hop seemed to be an industry, as I said earlier, that we have allowed ourselves to be a genre that people don't mature, and they're not expected to present a mature message. Which is like so dangerous for not just us as talent, because, you know, there's a whole lot that can come about in terms of mental illness, you know what I'm saying? And in terms of a whole lot of other outcomes from only representing one type of energy because you're trying to position yourself to stay in the game. So it started being harder actually for us because the curators, not only the curators, but the older generation of males, not all of them, but many of them all got a little fearful, and they got fearful of losing their space, feeling like the only way they could stay alive is by pushing the younger generation in front of the scene. And so, and I get that, so there was an image, there was a fear that came about because of different powers that be that made it seem like, oh, you got to only have a young message to reach the young people, and this is how you survive. Outside of Daddy-O and Chuck D, and it's not many of the older generations that didn't think this way. They're an exception to the rule. I'm over here in my own corner on the West Coast, thinking like this, acting like this, talking like this, living like this. I'm totally a black sheep, to be honest with you, because it ain't nobody over here thinking like me. And it's not because it's a coastal thing. It's just, it's a mature thing. You know what I mean? And and I had to mature pretty quick, and I seen a little more well-rounded of how music can influence and how it could also mess with your real life when you live in this, you're doing it as a lifestyle. You know what I mean? So the bottom line is, somebody found that they wanted to take control of females. Okay, meaning that somewhere along the line, while the older men got scared to be mature and forgot that they were leaders, okay, and forgot that they had power, because many of us was our own machines. We didn't rely on the typical system. We were independent, and we did have access to the best of both worlds, commercial and independent. So even though we got one of the biggest record deal at that time in the industry by joint venturing with Jive Records, we had already sold many golds and platinums, with no radio play, just out the trunk and on foot, and gathering relationships around the world. But they forgot that. They forgot that they were in control. And somewhere along the line, they started feeling like they got to push now the younger generation in front of everybody. So that's how they survive. And then they forgot to help keep the older people balanced, and involved. So they didn't do what Ice-T did. This industry does not allow you to get well. It doesn't allow you to, if you allow it to run you, it doesn't allow you to stop and breathe. As a woman, it doesn't allow you to be a woman. They don't want you to have kids or to have mature hip hop specifically. They don't want you to, to talk sweet, or, they just want you to rough it, and it's great to rough it from time to time, but you still should have that time to be the woman that you are, because that's what we were born to do. With that, have children, build families, represent as women, bring that balance, support our kings, and because of that, somewhere along the line, it made the others who were within the scope of the industry as older males, I don't know if it was more so intimidating or let me keep control, or I'm not sure what the mindset was, but I do know that they started feeling like they wanted to endorse the women now all of a sudden, and women were able to hold their own, all of us, Roxanne Shante, Mia X, myself, Conscious Daughters, Foxy Brown, Lil Kim. Basically, these are beginner trailblazers we all did that the girls are doing now that's getting all the credit. But they're not giving us the credit and allowing us to exist because, we're interested in having well-rounded things going on, not just one message.
I want to talk about One Nation a bit. Obviously a project, spearheaded by Daddy-O and Chuck D, which Opposition is very proud to be a part of. But more than a project, really, it's a movement. Bringing artists together from all over the world, releasing songs, bringing awareness to specific causes. And the original movement, Self-Destruction, was now over 30 years ago, 31 to be exact. And back then, it was really, mainly just New York rappers and just focusing on one cause, stopping the violence. With One Nation, you're now doing it on a more global scale with so many issues to touch. What kind of were the main reasons for you both to kind of bring it back today? Like, what made you decide to bring the movement back?
Well, Chuck has a line that's probably soon to become a brand, and I don't know how far we're gonna go far with this thing, but it's an energy called For the Sake of Heavy Music, right? So everything for One Nation is for the sake of heavy music. Chuck's thing was, Daddy-O, this might sound facetious, but it's real. Anybody could do anything, right? So One Nation, we grabbed the One Nation because that was an effort that Tupac had created, not able to forward it based on, I always say One Nation is the hip hop Pan-Africanism, right? That's the easiest way for me to see it, where all these artists get together for the sake of heavy music. And I think it's because, I think part of it is what we do at Spit Slam, because, I never forget when I signed a Spit Slam in 2016. I had a conversation with Chuck, and I tell people all the time, when me and Chuck talk, it's always 3 hours, probably sometimes 2, but most of the time 3. So this 1 hour, 3 hour conversation. He told me, he said, Daddy-O, listen, man, the bucket is underneath how you put the bucket in the tub and the tub is dripping. It's gonna fill up, but it's gonna fill up drip by drip, right? But just don't even think about that. Just know that it's gonna fill up, right? Take your mind off of, grabbing it, trying to force it. Just do what you do, right? And it turned into something that I couldn't even imagine it being. I started off kind of, I feel like I started off kind of slow, even though we were loving what I did. Man, but by the time I did From My Hood to You, man, it started turning into something different. And people started saying, yo, right? So by the time I did Now the Present album, now there's a Public Enemy record, which is dope. Not only single, but an album, a Public Enemy album that's dope, right? They do the Fight the Power remix, and it starts looking like, yo, we could do this. You understand what I'm trying to say? Because the Fight the Power remix is kind of the forgive me, but I'm gonna say it. It's kind of the John the Baptist to the movement, right? It's the herald to show Black Thought, Rhapsody, with Chuck, with Nas, right? And it just gave us so it's all the things that we've been doing together for the last, since at least 2000, I'm saying since 16, at least 2014, right? But when we were doing it, we always think about what Chuck was saying about, we already know that we ain't gonna be so we gonna go to London and kill it. Like, we not really trying to hang around y'all like that. Because one thing I will say, and this is at the sake of whatever, we never thought that we weren't musicians. We never thought that. It's never crossed my mind. It's never crossed Chuck's mind. It was never, I'm just a rapper and that's it. Or, no disrespect to Bam, Herc, or nobody else, I'm just a hip hopper and that's it. We knew that we are the extensions of the Black music that came before us. And so that's all we ever did. Talking about those people on that tour bus, man, Chuck says this often, you got 3 incredible albums coming out of that one tour bus, right? You got It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold It Back by Public Enemy, In Full Gear by Stetsasonic. But what people don't know, Prince Paul is in the back of the bus writing 3 Feet High and Rising. That all came out of hearing me and Chuck arguing and talking. And he's like, you know, listen, Paul here, young dude, he's like, so I'm not going where they go. I'm going over here. But the bottom line is that we always, and if you look at Day Live, you look at any things, if you look at Son of Berserk, if you look at any of the things that come out of us, you see the concept of being a musician. Yeah, we rap, and that's what we do. But you see the concept of being a musician. So coming back to One Nation and for the sake of heavy music, the self-destruction movement, that's what we know can happen now. So I think everything culminated to now. And the coolest part, well, one of the coolest parts, and I'm just gonna put you on the spot, Shane, one of the coolest parts for us here is being able to do it with opposition, because that first, you know, that first little whatever we did, Zoom chat, whatever, it was dope because, you know, I'm looking at a bunch of young people that's like thinking the same kind of things I'm thinking, but I don't know y'all. I never knew you. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm hearing things come out of your mouth and some of the things coming out of your team mouth. And I'm like, hold up. So I think that makes sense. And I think it, you know, I mean, I don't know if people notice it, but look at your name. Yeah. Right? It's just, we are opposition. Like, we ain't really fucking with y'all like that. Like, not y'all. We not y'all. And that works with us. So I think, you know, it's just a culmination of everything we've been. For me, is that conversation with Chuck D of him saying, Daddy-O, the bucket is underneath the faucet, but don't worry about trying to speed it up, filling it. And so now it's starting to, now this thing is starting to take a shape that I didn't even expect. Like some of the people that's rapping on these records and doing a record that has Chuck D and Toby and Wigway on one song, that is blowing my friggin' mind. You know what I mean? So now it's starting to take, but that's what music does, right? That's the same example that Chuck gave earlier when he was saying, you know, you, you try to put the cat in the bag with, and I know how that is, but for me, it's dogs. I remember one time I tried to put my dog, I found a little thing in Marshalls or something, and it was a nice little, looked like a little cage, you know, but it was made out of this, like, this little soft wood. You know, I put my dog in there, man. I came home, man. That thing was all ripped up. He got out. You know what I'm saying? So that's what this One Nation thing, we got out. The young kids would say, we outside. You know, but we you know, and we can partner with folks like Sugar T that are, you know, the reason me and Sugar, besides for, you know, me loving her from a long time ago, but that's another story. The reason me and Sugar connect on the One Nation for the sake, you know, heavy music, the self-destruction movement, is because of the work that she's doing. And we want to be a voice for those people doing the real work, because, and I'm not trying to disrespect myself, but I say this all the time. I'm not out there every day with, say, an addict or somebody that just came home from jail, or somebody that's just came out of, me and her had a long conversation about women that's coming out of trafficking, right? Which is all the subjects that we're going to cover on these series of records. And we want to give a voice to that, and you know, really be the soundtrack for helping people out, you know, because it don't take that much. You do your part, you know what I mean? So that's what that's where we going, and Chuck could add on to that.
No, everything you said was just unbelievably on point. Yeah, Sugar said rapdemic. Rapidemic.
That's dope. That's dope.
That's just it. And correct, that one word could just kind of bring you a whole catalog volume of understanding. And this is why we do this with the words. And we're not in an audio visual age anymore. That disappeared 30 years ago. We're in a visual audio age, and everything that we do audibly is done to the 100. But also the thing is this, and I try to get this across to everybody who's involved with the Spit Slam record label group or with Rap Station. Do what you got to do in your audio delivery. try to stay far away from metrics and analytics, because the lack of metrics and analytics will be intimidating to your creativity. Your movement and your quote unquote success in this will be based on your business model tied into the visual, audible aspect, and also your range in the world. The pandemic truly has really, the pandemic stopped everything. It stopped everything except for the world that they tried to build 20 years ago called cyberspace. That has enhanced. But everybody's walking around in swamps and muds, and some people have built huts from 20 years ago and trying to figure out how to modernize their huts. So that world is forming. Matter of fact, it's been sped up in the last 12 months anyway. So no matter what business that you might be in, and some business have not made that transition. But culturally and artistically, everybody's music turned catalog is now a legacy and now going to be its own universe. And that's why you shouldn't stop making music, visual, documentation, books, records, everything that you do, because that model, if you want to put it to business, which is kind of ugly, I don't try to say I'm a businessman at all. As a matter of fact, I say I'm not a businessman. I'm an artist, I'm a curator, I'm a culturalist, I'm a raptivist, and I keep it like that. Matter of fact, this is really clear. Daddy-O and Sugar T will tell you that we come from the aspect of being staged. We hone our craft being stage MCs with a microphone. Well, we didn't start off being booth rappers. And that's a whole different other dynamic too. So
It
that's something that
is.
a booth rapper and a stage MC is just like, you know, I mean, if you come into a studio like this, holding something, that could mean that you got some chops from somewhere else that you might deliver. If you come into a studio and got to have this in front of you, and that's a whole nother dynamic. So nobody's gotten into those different sciences of what this is and what this ain't. I just would like to tell people, if you're making records, you're doing things audibly, you're adding things visually, you're adding things book-wise, you're completing a universe around you, and your universe is not tied into analytics and metrics that will necessarily take care of your day or will feed you consistently until it finds you and you find it. And everything right now is soft, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. Everything has been softened by the pandemic on the regular. Everything's been leveled. I mean, sports can't look at promotion. Promotion's whole mentality for the last 100 years since the circuses has been find a spot and pack as many people into that spot as you can, as they charge you the rate to get that spot. That has been removed. Once you remove that whole premise of performance and live and the way that you happen to make your money and somebody makes their money on you has been eradicated. So the visual, the digital performance realm, you know, the virtual has all taken shape. And one thing that it's going to have to be rooted in is going to have to be rooted in content. Your content is your blood. It's your blood for the next 10, 15 years, whether you're here or not. Because these things will last probably, you know, definitely they're going to last, you know, when we're dead. You can go pick up any blues and jazz. What you say, sometimes you go in these spots and you pick up a blues and jazz 6 CD set in a truck stop, and 98% of those artists are dead. And 95% of all those songs are public domain. But you best to believe every single one of those things is monetized and leading to some kind of breadcrumb somewhere that's putting some kid not just to college, but sending them to college, and sometimes having that college name something off of their family. Trust me. So there's none of this work for naught. If you turn your blind eye to what you're creating and don't have a sense of what you're creating and don't try to tell your loved ones what it is, then it's gonna go and it's gonna be a river that goes to somebody else.
Just one last question, kind of switching gears a bit, because by the time this interview comes out, we'll actually be right in the middle of Officer Siobhan's court case for the murder of George Floyd. And we've been down that road many times before, and we've seen the justice system fail us time and time again. So like, what kind of expectations do you kind of set going in to help you prepare and process, you know, the result of a trial of this magnitude?
Don't use we so loosely.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use we
Exactly.
so loosely.
Yeah.
It's, yes, we are of that, but it's up us to our energy and the people who are younger who are in the middle of this time to use that energy to make that we really count, uppercase. We could say we're of slavery, we can't say we were slaves. We just got to be able to say, what are we going to do in our state and time to stand against what we see is wrong? What is this present hemisphere going to do? Grouping a collective of people. Yo, man, last summer, young people marched because they saw what happened was a tipping point. They locked inside. They're not sure about that. They told this, they told that in a wild, crazy year where the invasion has come from something you can't see on a microscope with a whole bunch of new rules and regulations, but the same old bullshit. So the same old bullshit happens, and Young Energy basically said, yo, y'all old heads keep seeing the pages turn with new names. You know what I'm saying? New names. When y'all going to just say, stop for a minute and say, this is crazy? So the tipping point hit some young heads and say, no, look, we keep seeing pages turn, and y'all must have seen more pages just turn. We not going to that old guard right now. You know what? We're going to go on our local areas, march, take down statues. We're going to do something. Only thing to me, old heads could do, guide, advise Young Energy. Old heads are not Young Energy's leadership. Young Energy is its leadership with our guidance and our directions. The biggest difference between 1989 and 2021 is that old heads have transitioned on out. Younger heads have been born since, who are now older heads. You got to give them the tools to be able to run their own environment, and leadership is going to come from that, with our advice and our nurturing and our guidance alongside, like you training, like you running alongside a kid on a bike with training wheels or whatever, no training wheels. And finally, you got to let them, okay, all right. And they turn around and see that you ain't there no more. And you're like, yeah, you keep going. That's what old leadership did when we were growing up, and they just say, yo, yeah, y'all guys, we won't be on the side of that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I feel that, when this case comes up, you have people that basically know that, oh, this is about us right here and right now to this second. This ain't got nothing to do with nothing else because they ain't handle that right. We gonna be the ones that are gonna check this out. And, we'll take some advice on it, but it might be different circumstances. It might be circumstances that y'all might not be able to stop or help because that, the pages just ain't gonna turn the same way. And we got to be kind of aware of that.
Yeah, I think my neck is probably hurting from head bobbing so much because so many great points.
Mine too.
So I appreciate all three of you and Alan before for all the gems you've been dropping. So thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. And thank you all.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Hey, love you, Sugar T. Love you, Daddy Yo.
Love you, Chuck.
Love you too, Shane, and also the young brother that we'd like to thank you. And also, don't let them take that Sugar T backdrop down.
Okay, Chuck. I'm gonna call you. I love you too. God bless you. Be careful, okay?
All right,
all right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to working with you. Daddy, your hugs and love.
Yes. See you.
I'm gonna call you too.
Okay.
Take care, Shane. Keep up the good work.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace.